Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra on the left and the Tab S7 Plus on the right. But I'm also going to be comparing the 8 Ultra to the 8 Plus. The reason being is that the Tab S7 Plus is nearly identical to its successor. They have the exact same form factor, exact same display size, 12.4 inches. Yes, the new S8 Plus has slightly more resolution, but it's the same panel technology, Super AMOLED panel, high refresh, 120 hertz. It has a newer processor from Qualcomm. It has more RAM than the base entry-level model of the 7 Plus, but I do have the 256 internal storage, which had 8 gigs of RAM, so this model's right on par with at least the RAM that you get with the S8 Plus. So really, the only other thing is the keyboard cover, which Samsung eliminated the trackpad. So if you want a trackpad for your S8 Plus, you'll have to go out and get the keyboard book cover from the older S7 Plus. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about pricing. $899 versus $1,099 for the entry level, respectively. I do not have the entry level Tab S8 Ultra. I have the mid, which has 256 gigs of internal storage and 12 gigs of RAM. But you'd be looking at 8 gigs of RAM if you went with the 1100, 8 gigs of RAM if you went with the Tab S8 Plus. And, performance is going to be really, really similar. But what I think is obvious, of course, is that the 14.6-inch display, also high refresh and higher res, is going to appeal to one audience, and the more portable 12.4-inch high refresh panel on the S8 Plus is going to appeal to another audience. Do they overlap? Absolutely, and I think inherently people are going to have a tough time deciding which is right for them. Now, for me, it was very simple. When the Tab S7 Plus launched, it was, in my opinion, the best tablet to ever compete with the iPad. When the Tab S8 Ultra launched, it was the best tablet ever made. And you might say, why? How could essentially we go from trying to compete with the iPad Pro to besting it? Well, it depends on what you think of when you think of besting existing tablet technology. And if for you it means having a larger display, since tablets are primarily designed to be used for content consumption, mobile games, some productivity work, well, then having a larger display, in my opinion, is more important than just about anything. Now, of course, you can't just get a bigger display and have junk on the inside. And that's not what you're getting here from either product, clearly. We have a best-in-class processor, solid amount of RAM, solid amount of internal storage, great cameras on both devices, really excellent. And then we even have a pretty decent keyboard that has backlighting now, something we did not have in the Tab S7 Plus keyboard book cover. So for me, again, the S8 Ultra represents the best of everything in the tablet world, and it is better than the iPad Pro simply because it gives me more of what I'm looking for, which is screen real estate, and it has a better display. And for everyone out there who's going to say that the iPad Pro still has a better display because it's brighter, that isn't the way things work. Having high brightness is good, especially for HDR content. That's not what you're doing on your iPad Pro. I hate to break the news. And for most human eyeballs, getting up to 1,000 nits of brightness is just way too much. Now, if you're competing with bright sunlight outside, I get it. That's a whole nother story. But even there, these are both going to do a really good job. You're not going to have a problem seeing them in bright sunlight. So this argument that it's not bright enough, and that applies to both the S8 Ultra as well as the S8 Plus, it's BS. You look at computer monitors, the majority of laptop displays, they're still right around 400 to 600 nits. That's the niche that these displays fit into. That is what we're accustomed to, and again, I feel like anyone who's arguing for 1,000 and above nits of brightness on a tablet has fallen prey to marketing. So with that out of the way, we've established the price difference really shouldn't decide for you, but it may. I mean, if you have a budget, it's fixed, and you can't exceed the $900, well, that's really the end of the story. But if you have that extra headroom, I highly recommend going with this. Yes, it's heavier, 1.6 as opposed to a little over a pound with the S8 Plus. I could say with the S7 Plus, but nobody's running out and buying that now. But realistically, the amount of room it's going to take up in the bag is going to be different. So it's not really about weight necessarily, because while there isn't a huge weight difference, the form factor is substantially larger on the left versus the right. But keep in mind, they both have the same processor, and they both have the same amount of RAM. If you're, again, going with the base level models. If you step up with the S8 Ultra, you go to 12 like I have. You can go up to 16 with the half terabyte model. I don't recommend that because I don't really see anyone necessarily needing that extra headroom for what Android can do. How do I come up with that conclusion? Well, using something like my daily driver, which is, of course, the Z Fold 3, I have 12 gigs of RAM. That's what it's been for 2 generations, and I never have a problem. And the same applies here. I mean, even with the 8 gigs on the S7 Plus, I've never had an issue. Now, both of these have the ability to run DeX, which gives you a desktop class experience, which is really nice. I think that that's one of the big bonuses of having a Samsung tablet, is that the software is better than what Apple has to offer. And people who make the argument that Apple has better software, well, they don't realize nothing's really changed over the years. Whereas Samsung has been evolving and creating a whole new ecosystem that's centered around multitasking and giving you all sorts of capability. You're not getting that with Apple. That doesn't mean that there aren't more optimized apps for, let's say, the Apple Pencil. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that overall the software, the One UI, which used to be TouchWiz, which used to be Cancer, is now the star of the show. And don't forget, both of these come with, of course, right here on the back flap, an S Pen, which is still best in class. Even if you're going to say it's not as good as something from Apple, these are excellent pens, and they both charge up right on the tablet, and they just work as they should. Now, not a tremendous amount of change from one generation to the next here. Remember, the Tab S7 Plus 2020, the S8 line, here the Ultra 2022, the end of February. What I can tell you is that since there is such a small performance difference going from the previous generation to the current, for me, it's really all about giving me something I didn't have before, and that is the bigger display. That is the keyboard that has backlighting. If this didn't exist, I don't think that I would be interested in upgrading the S7 Plus to the S8 Plus, because it is just such a small bump up in specs. There is nothing there that changes the game, and anyone who's out there saying the S8 Plus is the best tablet on the market right now, I don't disagree with you, but I think you never tried the S7 Plus, and you definitely never even saw the S6, because they still aren't that far from that performance and overall capability here today in 2022. So for me personally, as someone who has appreciated what Samsung has done with their tablet line, especially over the last 2 generations, it was really obvious that unless something like this launched, Samsung was not getting fresh money from me. Because it did, they got my fresh money, and it was easy to hand it over, especially with the trade-in benefit. This S7 Plus is going to go back. I wasn't positive, but as I've used it, it's become more clear to me that this is getting a lot more use than my old S7 Plus, simply because with that extra screen real estate, I can justify using it more often. Now, also, if you're gaming, forget about mobile gaming. Let's say you're using GeForce Now, you're using Xbox Live, you have the Game Pass, then again, you're going to enjoy having the extra screen real estate. I mean, there's really no downside to the additional screen real estate except portability, which again, it really comes down to how wide, how large that form factor is. I mean, it's not that much bigger, but it certainly is larger that in some of my camera bags, for example, this fits with ease. This is not going to make it because I need to have a 15-inch laptop slot, even though, of course, this machine is incredibly thin. I mean, that is not in question. When you turn it sideways, you can see the profile is nil. The same applies on the S7 Plus or the 8 Plus. They're really thin. There's not, no one's going to complain about the thickness. Now, when it comes to handheld use of these machines, I've heard a lot there too, that this is too large to handhold. I don't know where people come up with this stuff, because by that logic, this is too large to handhold. I mean, when you talk about any device being over a pound and you wanting to hold it in your hands long term, you will get fatigued. You will have problems. And yes, of course, this weighs more. I said it's 1.6 pounds as opposed to a little over a pound, but that isn't going to be the difference between being able to hand hold it and not. Remember, I also think it's fairly obvious for me that over my ownership of tablets for the last decade, I usually use them with a stand. Hopefully, you have a built-in one like the book cover, keyboard cover case, brings into the picture. If that's the case, then I don't even know why the conversation about how long you're going to be able to hold these devices comes into play. After all, when Apple introduced the iPad Pro, people were not complaining about that. They were just in awe of having such a big tablet. So somehow, the S8 Ultra has brought on scrutiny that didn't exist for Apple. Whatever it may be, seems to me like people are just in love. They're fanatics, and that's what drives them. And it wouldn't be the first time that, cult-like behavior equates to sales patterns and, personal consumer preferences that really aren't personal. So again, I don't think that the size of this should be intimidating. I think you should really be assessing what will it replace? What gap will it fill in your workflow? And while this is adorable, as I stated earlier, when there was nothing like this, this was the best option. There's a reason that when I reviewed the S7 Plus, I didn't tell people to go out and get the S7. I didn't think it was worthwhile. Not only was it not using an AMOLED display, but of course, it was a smaller panel. It was really aimed at competing directly with the iPad, not besting it. And I don't mean the iPad Pro, I mean the iPad. So I think Samsung has done an excellent job with both the S8 Ultra and the S8 Plus. I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. I think you just really need to choose the one that is right for you. In my previous coverage of the Tab S8 Ultra, I've stated over and over again that I don't think the S8 Plus is worth buying. That is my opinion. I stand by it because, again, as a consumer, a tablet user for over a decade who now has the S8 Ultra, it's giving me an experience that wasn't physically available prior to its launch from any manufacturer. This is the largest high-performance quality tablet ever made. So, as I stated at the top of this video, when the S7 Plus launched, we finally had a tablet that could compete with the iPad Pro. When the S8 Ultra launched, we finally had a tablet that could do things and give us an experience that no other manufacturer, including the iPad Pro, could deliver. So I think that really sums it up. If portability is your top priority, then obviously the Tab S8 or 8 Plus is the direction you should go. If budget is the only thing at play, again, Tab S8 or 8 Plus. But if you have the budget, I will reiterate over and over again, do not be intimidated by the size of this machine because you will find it far more useful. I mean, when you bring it into different parts of the house, when you travel with it, it is just always going to be better to have a larger display. I mean, this is kind of like people making the argument for televisions being smaller. The only way that argument makes sense is if, like me, you use a large-scale OLED display as your computer monitor. Then yes, I started at 55, I went to 48, and I'm sort of drooling over 42, but then again, everybody's drooling over the 34-inch Dell. So, OLED, that is, the QD. So, that's the perspective I'm going to put it in. Granted, you don't pick up a TV and walk around with it. I just don't know anyone, there are very few people, I won't say anyone, I do know a few, that don't want the largest, highest quality TV that money can buy. Usually that's the case and they just can't afford it. So here, to me, again, the small price gap, the zero performance difference, by the way, battery life, it's a wash. You might get a little bit more out of the S8 Plus, but not enough to justify going with the S8 Plus over the S8 Ultra. So hopefully I've made it clear. I know I didn't show a lot on the tablets because the experience is exactly the same, except for, again, having a much bigger display that I think makes a world of a difference. Also, if, like me, you're a little bit older, I mean, I'm not old, but, your eyes, you wear glasses, whatever it may be, you're going to appreciate the larger display. I'll say that a million times over. I mean, my days of really wanting screens this size are kind of over. The only way I would justify it is in a tablet form. Yes, I have an Ultrabook with a 13.3-inch display, but going forward, I probably won't get another one with such a small display, and that 13.3 is still bigger than this 12.4. So this is the only way you'd get me to get something under 13 inches in 2022, and that would only be if this didn't exist. And again, I already stated at the top of the video, I would not upgrade personally from the S7 Plus to an S8 Plus because there's just no there. I mean, that's literally a spec bump and a retitling for quarterly profits. This is a new entry. This is, in my opinion, a game changer in the tablet realm. You watch Netflix on this, HBO Max. It's an experience. On this guy, it's a tablet. This is a different beast just because now you nearly have the size of a 15-inch laptop, but you have none of the thickness, none of the heat, none of the noise, and you have a display that's better than almost every other 15-inch display on the market, because even if they are OLEDs, they aren't high refresh. And there I leave it. And they also don't have S Pen, which, by the way, is excellent. Hopefully I'll have an artist perspective, or at least a artist demo on the S8 Ultra for all of you soon. But that rounds it out. Again, I would go with the S8 Ultra all day long. If portability and pricing matters to you more, you have the S8 Plus. Just remember, it's not really that much different than the 2-year-old S7 Plus you've been looking at through the course of this video. And that's part of the reason I can't recommend anybody throwing fresh money at that. A lot of iPad users are going to it just because they want an alternative to the iPad Pro that has a pen, a nicer display, and that's a similar form factor, even if it's not the same aspect ratio. I get it. But there are also a lot of Apple iPad Pro users that are jumping on the Ultra because they know it is the best tablet on the market here in 2022. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.